What's going on, everybody? It is the one and only Q from Retro Q Gaming, back in effect as always. And here we are with episode 20 of our lovely little Quack experimental podcast. A lot to talk about this week, thankfully, because the last couple of weeks have been kind of dry. There hasn't been too much going on in the last couple of weeks. But I want to talk, just before we get started, I just want to mention one thing briefly. I never really appreciated it until now, but I only really hear this from tourists and everyone else and friends who come visit and stuff like that, but I never realised just how green Ireland actually was. Never noticed it. Never noticed it. But anyway, let's go. We go straight into our first topic here, which is a new Microsoft controller patent. Now, of course, before we go any further, patents get filed and trademarks and whatnot and ideas get patented. All this stuff happens all the time and not everything has to come out of it. So it's more so just the potential. But anyway, new Microsoft controller patent, specifically designed for smartphones. I want to reiterate that one more time. It's specifically designed for smartphones. Has kind of led some, I won't say questionable stuff out there, but it's led a lot of the news going on out there as well. Now, if you've seen this controller patent, since it's for smartphones, it comes with two detachable modules. So, when you look at a regular phone, it has two detachable modules for the side of it. So there's one for this side and one for this side. And that's it. So what it does is it changes your phone into, well, a controller, if you will, a proper physical controller. Now, the reason why it does, it basically makes it into an Xbox controller, because the left-hand side of it has a stick, it has one or two face buttons that will be akin to select and, stuff like that, as well as a D-pad. And on the right hand side, it's got another stick, as well as your regular face buttons and a couple of others that will be like start and whatever on there too. It's, because of the design and the patent and all, it's unclear if it has shoulder buttons or triggers. I would assume it will, because of what we're going to talk about in a minute. Now, this controller is not designed for the Xbox 2.4. This is not replacing the 2.4 controller, not replacing the Xbox controller as we know it. And no, they are not making a Nintendo Switch. What this controller is actually for is Project xCloud. So this is primarily designed for Project xCloud streaming service, because if you remember a little while back, Microsoft talked about going forward that they're going to have a big focus and a big push on their Project xCloud, which is going to stream games. There was all these rumors and all as well about the 2.4 having two different models. One was a local hardware console and the other was just kind of a basic streaming box that would allow you to use the Project xCloud and get in on the 2.4 Microsoft system considerably cheaper, because there'd be no real proper hardware in it. So it would be, obviously that rumor, by the way, has probably been crushed, because Microsoft have said there's no plans for a streaming only console for the next one. We don't know if that's true. You know how they bullshit and all this stuff. But anyway, back to the controller. So this controller is designed for Project xCloud, because you can stream your Project xCloud stuff to pretty much anything. PCs, laptops, smartphones. Obviously, if you have a PC or a laptop, you can easily use the mouse and keyboard or just plug in a regular controller. For the phones, it's not really the case. You can't play a proper modern game on a smartphone. Even with the touchscreen controls and all, there's just not enough of them there. So you would need basically an Xbox controller, which is what this turns it into. Now, many people out there are going to make the obvious comparisons like I did a moment ago in this video, in this segment, but this is nothing to do with the Switch. These types of controllers, these types of add-ons that you put on both sides and whatnot too, I realize that the Nintendo guys out there, they don't know anything that's not Nintendo, but these controllers have existed for about 10 years. Since smartphones were a thing and smartphone games became a thing. You could get these, they'd pop on each side, or they would just sit there, or your phone would sit into it and it would connect with Bluetooth or connect in through a cable or whatever it was. But it's going to be interesting to see the first party variant of these, assuming, of course, that means they're going to be higher quality compared to a lot of the cheap knockoff shit we see for every phone out there. So I don't think this is a great idea, in a sense that it doesn't appeal to me at all. I don't know how many people would use it. After all, in the last maybe decade or so, I can probably count on one hand how many times I've actually seen people use those those style of things in the wild. Um, After all these years, it's probably 3 times, maybe 4. Less than 5 for sure. Because you see it once every few years, and just the idea of it is like, holy shit, that person's actually using one of them. It remains to be seen anyway. Will it take off? I don't think the Project xCloud thing or streaming services in general are going to take off. I think they're absolutely awful, and they will never, ever, 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 ever be a replacement for real locally rendered gaming. And even for phones and stuff like that, or even to be able to continue on your progress and all, it's just no. That's going to be a no from me, dog. But moving along, we're going to look at a giant clusterfuck of a situation. Now, you might remember a little while back I talked about it when G2A, the grey market key selling website, were bringing up a new system. There were so many developers, indie developers and whatnot, that were saying that they would rather people pirate their games than buy them from G2A or other similar sites. They specifically listed G2A because they were buying Google ads at the time, and, well, it basically fucked over developers and stuff like that too. Now, part of the system that they were going to, or they at least alleged that they were going to try and work on, was that they were going to make a system to check out fraudulently sold keys. And what they were going to do is, because the developers had to pay extra fees and lost money and all on chargebacks and fraud keys and whatnot, they said that they were going to pay developers who suffered from this through G2A and any of their problems, any of their systems or whatever, was that they were going to pay them 10 times what they lost. Now, there was a couple of caveats on this too. For example, they were only going to devise this system if 100 developers had signed up by August 15th. It's currently August 17th. Now, this news is a few days old, but it's currently August 17th, and let's just go with August 15th. Only 19 developers at the time had signed up for this program. So they extended it to the end of August. Now, not much is probably going to change within the next 2 weeks. After all, you would have assumed that given a situation like this and a program like this, that anyone who was really and truly interested in it, they would have jumped at it straight away. Anyway, there's a list out there, 19 developers. I'm not going to go into the big list of it, but I will talk about one of them in particular, mainly because I think it's really funny. 19 developers, 18 of them are just small indie developers. But of course, it's funny to me that they're all indie developers except for one. Deep Silver, the greedy, money-hungry fucks, Deep Silver are the only non-indie publisher to sign up for this program. I think that's hilarious. Especially considering that now, as far as we know, that Deep Silver will only be selling Epic keys. And of course, you don't buy Epic keys normally. You buy them from legitimate, what do we call them? Legitimate associated retailers, if you will. Like Humble Bundle and whatnot. And that links directly to it and all. It's unfamiliar if they're, or unconfirmed if they're going to be selling Steam keys going forward, because obviously they're jumping on the Epic exclusive everything bandwagon and riding that money dick. But anyway, back to the point. Unknown Worlds. It's a small independent development studio. Now, you may know them from Subnautica, that's their big claim to fame, but they also have a bit of an older game. Well, they have a couple of older games, but they have one higher profile one in this case called Natural Selection 2. Now, they submitted all this stuff, and after all the info was put out, they said, hey, G2A, based on your promise and all that too, yeah, you owe us $300,000. Because they suffered $30,000 worth of chargebacks and fees and whatnot because of fraudulent keys and fraudulent cards and refunds and charges and all that stuff too. Now, $300K is a lot of money. So, it of course escalated from there, and it just got worse on both sides. Both the Unknown World side as well as the G2A side. Now, will they get it? Who knows, but probably not, but you'll see why now in a second anyway. So, you may remember I talked about something along the lines of this before, where a small software company called Woob Studios, or Woob Software, I don't remember what it was, they submitted about $6,600 worth of fraud and fees and whatnot for charges and all that stuff. They submitted them to G2A to have all that stuff checked. Of course, a month later, or a month, maybe 6 weeks later, whatever it was, their independent company and all is still checking this stuff, and of course, they still haven't been paid. Anyway, just so there is precedent for some stuff possibly happening and this thing possibly existing. But back to the real situation. G2A have come out and issued a statement about it and said, oh, we consider this slandering our good name. We expect a retraction or deletion as well as an apology, blah, blah, blah. And they tried to say that G2A didn't even exist back when the Natural Selection 2 keys were sold. Now, here's where legalese and semantics and all this shit comes in. And I absolutely despise when they try to bullshit their way around this stuff. According to G2A's own website and some of their own details in there, as well as, you know, stuff like archives and the Wayback Machine and all that too, G2A did exist back in 2013 when this was sold, when these keys were sold. Now, there's a couple of information, a couple of bits of information and key points to be in there. G2A was under its original name. So technically, you could argue that G2A did not exist back then, because at the time, G2A was called Go To Arena, the number 2, Go To Arena. But you might notice, if you acronym that down, it's still G2A. But of course, and that website, Go To Arena, has existed since 2010. So, even though technically it wasn't G2A and they're not lying by saying it. Well, they are lying by saying G2A didn't exist in that time. But you see my point. You see why I think that's a load of bullshit anyway. And of course, that's all on their own website and through their own information. Now, here's the problem. It gets worse and worse, okay? It still gets worse and worse. That's right. The founder, after all of this, a couple of days have passed and all this stuff, more info has come out. The founder of Unknown Worlds, Unknown Worlds, the studio, with so many like Outer Worlds, Outer Wilds, Unknown Worlds, I had to keep looking at the notes here to make sure. The founder of the studio looked into it and he says, oh, you know, maybe G2A is right. They weren't the source of the 30,000 keys, the $30,000 worth of keys. It's just an absolute mess. It's just an absolute mess. You think that before this whole situation kicked off, that he would have understood, he would have looked into it, he would have got a little bit of information about it, whatever it was. He would have known all of this before putting up something like that. Idiocy. Idiocy. Absolutely idiocy. Now, of course, he tried to defend his position a little bit. He goes, oh, well, you know, the G2A wasn't the source of those $30,000 worth of keys. They didn't sell keys back then, but they have been ever since. I mean, yeah, we know G2A is supposedly a shady company from a lot of the reports and all out there too, but just do some fucking research. Do some research. I mean, if you want to shit all over indie developers, or if you want to give indie developers a bad name, just do what Sean Murray did and just release something as crap as, what's it called, One Man's Lie. It's that easy. And then you can try curry favor back by patching it several years later, but no, your reputation is fucked as it is. Anyway, I think this is just a big ha-ha in relation to both parties involved. I think Unknown Worlds and the guy who runs it are just woo lad. And G2A, well, like I said, I have no experience with them properly myself, but I just think the whole situation, given the reputation, everything about it in general, is just woo lad. This brings up a whole question about the ethics of the grey market. Now, I've used the grey market before. I've bought multiple CD keys from various websites. In fact, funny enough, I don't know how I even swung this, because this is very weird. I bought a Metro Exodus key for Steam before they pulled the Epic Games thing. Oh, well, technically not before they pulled it. I did it the night they announced it. And I didn't pay full price for it. I paid almost full price for it. But I paid what I paid for it. And then, just out of curiosity, when there was the whole refund thing on Steam and all, I tried to refund it. And I got my refund. And I got my refund directly to my linked card to Steam, even though I didn't use that. And I got full price for it. I think that's very strange. I think that's kind of strange. But I'm not complaining. I'm not complaining in that regard. But anyway, I didn't buy that from G2A, by the way. I bought it from elsewhere. But the funny thing is, grey market ethics. The big problem with all of this, I mean, I don't think the grey market in general is a bad idea. I don't think it's a bad system. I don't think it's bad, whatever. But there are things that need to be refined and improved, and safeguards that need to be put in place. Mainly because you have all these thousands tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, whatever it is, of dollars, of euro, of rubles, of rupees, of fucking space currency, whatever it is. You've all these problems with all these chargebacks, all these keys, these fraudulent ones, people buying 10,000 keys and then cancelling the account so no one gets paid, but they still have the keys, and they resell them, they keep all the money from the resales, and then of course the developer who made those keys cancel those keys and people get fucked. So there is a big improvement that needs to be made in grey market areas. However, who is the onus on for this? Is it the grey market themselves? Is it the people who run these sites? Is it the developers? Is it the publishers? Is it the platform holders? We don't know. It's still, I can't even say it's relatively new in its infancy, because the grey market has been a thing for over 10 years at this point now. Hell, it's been arguably even longer. Granted, it has more features than the Epic Game Store, even though it hasn't been around as long as Epic has. But there's progress to be made, and I don't think it's a bad system overall. It's just not in its proper one to work from there. So I don't know. What do you think? Have you used the grey market? Do you think it's all bullshit? Do you think all the money should go to the developer, all the money should go to the publisher, or you have to buy it on your own individual thing? Let me know all that in the comment section below, because that goes perfectly in hand with Cyberpunk 2077 and buying it on GOG versus buying it on Steam, because we all know no one's buying it on Epic or anywhere else. But speaking of bullshitness, keys, games, PC games, and, well, the piece of shit cunts behind Epic Games, well, we have Borderlands Tree. Now, of course, Borderlands Tree is less than a month from its fake-ass, early access, bitch-ass motherfucking launch. And then we've got about 7 months before its real launch, after all the bugs and all our beta tested out and all that stuff, and the real players get to play it. But anyway, I bet everyone, who isn't me of course, is super excited, super hyped, super whatever it is, to preload it and play it at midnight, at launch, at whenever it is in September that it launches on the Epic Game Store. Except the Epic Game Store can't preload games. That's right. Despite them having planned on having it ready from preloading, having it ready from May 2019, the Epic Game Store cannot preload games. Yet another instance of an extremely basic and quality industry standard feature from several years, if not longer at this point, missing from a supposedly 2019 modern game store. All of this from a company 3 decades in PC development, and of course, with billions and billions of dollars under their belt. Feels... What does it feel? I can't say vindicated. Feels hilarious, man. That's the best way I can say it. I just think it's so funny that people defend the Epic Game Store so vehemently. And it just... What doesn't register in my mind is, how are people defending this? People's big argument, at least the fanboys' big argument, is, oh, Steam didn't launch with these features when it launched 13 years ago, or what is it, it's 2019 now. Steam didn't launch 15 years ago with all these features. That's right, Steam didn't. Steam broke new ground, did something brand new at the time. It had to learn and develop and lead at the forefront and come up with this stuff in all brand new uncharted territory. And it did this progressively, slowly, piece by piece. I just don't get it. And then this other company jumps in, 14 years later, and do none of what everyone else laid as the groundwork after all these years. These are some of the main reasons why people don't want to support this company and support this store. Because they can just do all this bullshit practices, just throw money in the wrong places and just say, well, fuck you, now you have no choice. We don't need to offer you a better experience, or we don't need to offer you industry standard features for dozens, well, I can't say dozens, but for years at this point, multiple years. But we're not going to give you those. We're just going to force you to give us money if you want to play this game within the next 6 months or a year or whatever, through legal means. That's why many people have donned the piracy hat, have donned their eye patch, donned their peg leg, their hook hand, and their little parrot for the first time in years, for the first time in probably a decade, because of the Epic Game Store. onto some potentially interesting Switch news at the moment. Now, you might remember the Nintendo Switch online service, that terrible, awful online service subscription one they have with paid peer-to-peer servers, cloud saves that don't work on all games, especially don't work on any of the important ones, and generally 2 to 3 shitty Nintendo games a month, or shitty NES games a month, I should say. Well, some of them started out okay, but then they moved to pretty awful and shitty, obscure stuff. But anyway, it looks like they could finally be getting SNES games at a long last. Now, this is especially funny because of the whole situation around it. In fact, it was just last week when I talked about how it was funny that they kind of scrubbed it all, and I basically saw them never actually adding them to it. Now, the reason why that's funny is when this service was originally announced back in January of 2017, when they went into full details about it, at the time, they originally listed and demonstrated and talked all about NES and SNES games. And then, of course, their website was updated to say NES and SNES games as part of the service. However, as time went by, before the service started, all mention of SNES games was removed. Every time they talked about it, it was only talking about NES games. All their websites and all were updated, and all references to SNES was completely removed from every type of thing. Now, on top of all of that, okay, it looks like there is a potential for it to actually finally be getting SNES games. So, an FCC filing, trademark, including images and whatnot, but don't forget this doesn't mean anything 100%, because let's reference the Microsoft bit at the start of this video, the start of the first segment, is that they now have the patents and all incorporated for a wireless SNES controller. Now, there's a couple of important things to note about this. So yes, it looks like a regular SNES controller. The majority of stuff is exactly like the regular SNES controller. There is one or two glaring problems. Not so much glaring problems, but glaring things that jump out. The product code registered includes the notation. Not the denomination, we'll go with the notation. It includes the notation. Designation, that's the word I was looking for, of the letters HAC. Now, HAC are the product codes designed to show you and indicate that something is designed for the Switch, specifically wirelessly with the Switch. So that is fairly important in that regard. So it basically means they're probably wireless Switch accessories. Probably going to be extremely overpriced, and probably going to be limited to those of you out there with Nintendo Switch subscription services. Yet again, because, you know, everyone loves having to pay for subscription service just to be able to pay again for something to buy pay for the privilege to pay for a privilege, if you will. Pay for the privilege to pay for a product. But anyway, back to one of the other important things. Because of the images and all that were submitted with them, they weren't 100% everywhere, and they weren't accurate, or more so that they weren't 100% detailed as I would have liked. Because when you look at the NES controllers that they released before, they have the rails on the top that could slide onto where the Joy-Cons go. Now, there's a problem with that for the SNES controllers. NES controllers don't have shoulder buttons. SNES controllers do. It has an L button and an R button. So, based on what we know with these images, it looks like they have the tiny little buttons that you would find on the Joy-Cons when you turn one of them sideways and just use the tiny little indentation buttons instead of the proper sized shoulder buttons. Now that kind of makes sense, but it's a terrible design choice, because if it has the rails so they can slide on where the Joy-Cons go, yeah, you can't fit proper full size buttons and all on there. So you'd have to have small little recessed tiny little shoulder buttons. Pretty much a bad idea, and awful way, because if you ever tried to use those, it's a terrible setup. But we have to wait and see. None of this is confirmed. None of this is official. We don't know yet. We are coming up on the 1 year anniversary after multiple delays of the online subscription service, probably because it's so shit. And who knows? Maybe they're going to put it out for the 1 year anniversary. Maybe that will be their one big announcement at the 1 year mark. We have to wait and see. There's no sign of a Nintendo Direct just yet. I can't remember when the subscription service launched. It was at the end of last year, but I don't remember exactly what month it was. But we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see. But onto some possibly positive news anyway. We're going to look at Timesplitters. Timesplitters is a series, for the most part, that I absolutely love and have, frankly, amazing games in them. Now, Timesplitters 1 and 2, I absolutely love. They're fantastic. They are phenomenal first-person shooters in so many different ways. They're so fun to play. Gunplay is so great in them. They haven't, I guess you could say they haven't aged perfectly, but they still have. You just need to get into the swing of it again. You need to get used to it. It feels different playing them with old school controllers. That's why, especially if you haven't played them in so long. Future Perfect was very meh to me. Haven't loved it. Didn't put a significant amount of time into it, but it just wasn't great for me. And in regards to Timesplitters and the IP, in 2018, Deep Silver, we'll say rescued is the only proper word I want to use. They rescued the IP from that awful developer that you probably know, Crytek. Because, well, if you play any of the Crytek games, they actually, well, with the exception of the very, very, very first Far Cry, all the Crytek games have terrible gameplay, terrible mechanics, and terrible gunplay. However, they look really good. So, that's what everyone knows them for. Now, anyway, Steve Ellis, who is one of the co-creators of, I was going to say Far Cry, one of the co-creators of Timesplitters, he has joined THQ Nordic to help them plot the future of Timesplitters as a series and their IP. Now, this is very positive because a couple of things out there. Deep Silver, when you look at it, they have some quality developers underneath them. They also have some terrible quality developers underneath them, which we'll talk a little bit about later. But you see the point. It can go either way. It's 50-50 almost at this point. It's basically a coin toss. So what's going to happen in a couple of years from now? Because obviously if you bring in someone to help plot the course of a series and whatnot, they're obviously going to try to plot out the next game, the story, the mechanics, who's going to develop it, what they want to do with it, yada, yada, yada. These things take time. And it's going to be a couple of years at the earliest. I mean, right now, 2019, I would say at the earliest, you're looking at 2022. This time, 3 years from now, 2022, before you could see any realistic semblance of a quality product. I think in 3 years, it wouldn't be the best thing. That would still feel a little bit rushed, but it would be adequate, an adequate starting point. Now, they could obviously probably fucking release it early and this point and then go from there, which I think would be a terrible idea, especially with a series like Timesplitters. You want to be a proper return to form after all these years. You have to wait, you have to do it right, you have to go big, you have to do it properly for all of this. So the other big question is, who would develop this? When you look at all the studios in there, I would put 4A Games in charge of this. Now that's just me. I know I've had some harsh words for 4A Games recently because some of the studio and some of the staff, obviously it wasn't the official line and all, but some of them were being cunts about Metro Exodus. But because of their quality and their gunplay and all too, I feel like if Steve Ellis could rein them in to not do open world bullshit, because clearly Metro Exodus sucks in that regard, and the only proper true quality levels in that game are the linear story-based ones, the non-open world stuff, the ones where you're forced to do what old school Metro did best. Well, that's kind of what Timesplitters is. Don't give it open world. Give it proper focus, proper quality, proper levels, proper character, proper design, proper everything. And I think 4A Games could do a wondrous job with it. Otherwise, we might end up with some bullshit that we're going to talk about next. And that bullshit, boyos, that we're going to talk about is Dead Island 2. Now, Dead Island 2, you might remember... Actually, you know what? Before we go any further, let me give you a brief little recap of the history of Dead Island. Dead Island 1, developed by Techland. Great game. Well, I can't say great game. Fun to play the first time. Very hard and very difficult to go back to. Dead Island Riptide. Can't remember who developed it for the life of me. I only played it years later, but wasn't enjoyable. I gave up after about 2 or 3 hours. I just couldn't do it. Now, Techland, who developed the very first Dead Island, went on to develop Dying Light, which is fantastic, except for the fact it's a single core game in 2015, 2016. But yeah, that's a glaring oversight. But overall, the quality of the game, the mechanics, everything about it, other than the fact it's a single threaded game, yeah, it's fantastic in that regard. And unfortunately, they had to pass development off for Dead Island 2 because they were developing a lot of Dead Island or Dying Light 2. So Dead Island 2 has been in development hell for a while. It's been passed around from developer to developer to developer like a used condom. Now, that's a bit of a problem because They constantly reassure us that the game is going to happen, despite these glaring red flags and glaring warnings, and this whole thing, this burning house behind you that says, warning, warning, something is going wrong here. And of course, they're standing in front saying, oh, move along, everything's fine, nothing to see here. So that's a problem. Now, the plot thickens, and it gets even worse. So, I'm sure many of you out there are deeply disheartened about the new info and the new news that you may or may not have heard of, but I'm going to break to you right now. And I don't want to be the one to do this, but currently, Dead Island 2 has been given to a new studio. This new studio has one game under their belt. They have one game developed in their history. This game was called, or this studio was called Dambuster Studios. And that little known game, for those of you out there, is Homefront: The Revolution. That game considered by many, critically, as well as those piece of shit SJW bloggers that claim to be games journalists, is considered to be one of the worst games ever made. Now, I haven't played it. I haven't played Homefront: The Revolution. For all intents and purposes, I understand it's absolutely awful. No, I'm not going to go out and make a video about it and get 1 million hits and then go on a holiday. But no, I understand it's pretty significantly bad, glaringly bad, they might say. Now, unfortunately, this means that Dead Island 2 is likely going to be DOA. Some people are just going to avoid it based on Homefront: The Revolution and Dambuster Studios' involvement in general. But most likely what's going to happen is this game is going to release or hit the previews or whatever it is and going to be absolutely shite. And of course, that all hinges on one major fact. If this game even releases or not. I have a feeling Dead Island 2 won't release. I have a feeling that after a while, maybe 2 years, maybe 18 months in development, that I think this game, THQ or whoever's in charge of it, I can't even remember. I can't even remember who's in charge of Dead Island at this point. It's just such a mess. But I think they're going to see what Dambusters have achieved, or specifically what they can't achieve in that time, and either take it away from them, or most likely just completely write it off. Which is a bit of a shame, because like I said, I liked the first game. I played through the first game when it first came out on the 360. I know, right? 360. But I played a lot of it, almost the entire game, co-op with a friend at the time. It was great. I know, like I said, different developer and all too. They could have improved so much, which was evidenced by what they did with Dying Light. So maybe Dying Light 2 is going to be their real proper continuation. And Dead Island 2 is just a pipe dream. So, pretty much F for Dead Island 2 in some way, shape or form, be it the quality of the game being absolutely awful if it even releases at all. It's a bit of a shame. It's a bit of a shame. At least the trailer, the live action thing, was pretty beast. But next we're going to talk about the upgraded Switch. No, not the Switch Pro, because that probably doesn't and probably never will exist. Even if it does, it still won't even be as powerful as an Xbox One, base Xbox One. But anyway, we're relating to the new battery life model, the one that launched a couple of weeks ago that has the new upgraded battery life and all too. It's just started appearing on store shelves over the last week or so, or maybe 2 weeks. But Nintendo have announced a kind of an upgrade program, if you will. And I'm very surprised that they're doing this, because usually console makers and manufacturers are doing this. Oh, but Nintendo loves... No, just stop. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Anyway, if you bought an original model Switch after July 17th, you can avail of this program. You can upgrade to the new battery life Switch at no additional cost for the main unit. Now, I say the main unit itself because you do have to pay for shipping. You do have to use a specific type of shipping, which is probably a little bit expensive. I say a little bit expensive. It's probably like $20, $30, $40, something like that. It remains to be seen. But based on my use of courier-based shipping and tracked shipping and whatnot, yeah, it makes sense. It would probably do that. Anyway, I have a lot of notes to read on this one. So, yeah, we've covered the shipping and all too. So, yeah, you can send the upgrade to you can send the item to Nintendo. They will check if it's eligible and whatnot too. There's a couple of forms and steps and all you need to do. So you do need to pay for shipping. they need to receive it within 14 days of you opening the support ticket. It will take 5 to 7 business days for them to check the console and then send you one back. Now, you also, yeah, like I said, if it's applicable, they will send you back a revised Switch with the improved battery life. You also have to include the charger, the dock, and the HDMI cable. They do not want the original box though. It needs to be trackable shipping in case it gets lost, and so that they can send it back to you if you do qualify and you're eligible for it. You need to include a proof of purchase, obviously, even though they could probably check out something, but it's just to make sure you didn't steal it, basically. So you need proof of purchase dated July 17th or after. All save data on the original Switch, if you were using it, will be lost. They do not give back the Joy-Cons, but however, you can choose to receive either a red and blue pair of Joy-Cons or the obviously superior grey Joy-Cons. Now, like I said, I do think it's very strange that a company would do this. Most places would just tell you to fuck off and you'd be shit out of luck and SOL. But yeah, it's interesting to do this, and it's good for those of it who need it and who can avail of it. But the big problem is I'm not sure why this program is even existing, or who this is existing for, or why they would do it. Simply because I tried it just recently, and the Switch is 100% absolutely unequivocally, yeah, I cannot say that word, unequivocally, there we go, unusable in portable modes. I tried it just recently, absolutely awful, could not do it whatsoever. Anyone who says that they can do that and enjoy it is lying and damage controlling. So on to more upgrades now, and we're looking at an Xbox related upgrade. Specifically, we're looking at the potential for a Halo Infinite upgrade. Now, you might be wondering, what am I talking about? Is there some big news that it's going to be leaving out Xbox One completely and it's only going to be focused on PC and next gen? No, unfortunately that's not the case. So what we're talking about when it comes to an upgrade is a potential, not even potential because this part is confirmed, but there's a leadership shift within 343 Industries. Now, Tim Longo, who's the creative director for Halo Infinite, has left 343 Industries after several weeks ago, stepping down or changing his role, changing his position, whatever. And now, Mary Olsen is stepping into the creative director role for the upcoming Halo Infinite next year. Now, we don't know what this means for the game just yet. We don't know how far along the game is in development. We don't know what's done, what needs to be done, what's still in progress, what she's going to affect, and what his leaving is going to change in that way. So we don't know any of it just yet. But, however, the reason why I say this is a potential upgrade for Halo Infinite is that Tim Longo was the creative director for Halo 5. Now, you might remember Halo 5 from myself, many other people out there, has been massively panned, at least as far as the story and the experience, the journey, everything about it in that regard, the narrative, the characters, a lot of that stuff has been panned in Halo 5. A lot of that will be down to him, his decisions, his choices, the people he works with, the ideas he gives them, whatever it is. So, now that he's gone, there's potential for it to be done well, potential for it to be fully upgraded, potential for it to go further and go back to some semblance of quality. Now, the gameplay for Halo 5 was mostly fine, but the story and all was completely different. At least the story in Halos 1 to 3, that's quality stuff. 4 is okay. 5, absolutely awful. But the gameplay was still good. So hopefully that is still retained. But the story, the quality, the narrative, all that stuff is massively improved. I will say this in his defense, of course. Halo 5, while a very subpar game from a story and narrative point of view, the legendary ending for Halo 5 hinted and it set up the massive potential for an absolutely amazing Halo Infinite, or Halo 6, Halo Infinite, same thing. Massively improved, massively potential quality stuff was set up right there. Hopefully they don't fuck it up. And with him gone, I'm still hopeful that they're not going to fuck it up now, and hopefully this goes worse. Obviously, Mary could do a much, much worse job, but this guy doesn't have a good track record at this point. Like, look at Halo 5. I don't want more of that. I don't want to risk more of that. I want Halo 6. Properly. Quality. So, we'll see how it goes. I'm very, very hopeful in that regard, and really, really do hope It's going to be amazing. Hopefully, by then, the Master Chief Collection is finally out on PC, even though that's, Halo Infinite, end of next year, end of 2020. Hopefully we get Master Chief Collection by then, as well as Halo 5 on PC. Now, that's a big ask, but yeah, we'll wait and see. But that's it. We're running up to our little end of our lovely little Quack Experimental Podcast, episode 20. So, naturally, before I go, I do want to say, what am I playing? Well, everyone is obviously interested. That's why I have these little segments and all too. So, I currently am in the midst of an existential gaming crisis. This happens now and again, depending on the situation, but this particular one is because of Fire Emblem. When I'm playing a nice big game, a long game, a very investing game, usually like a big RPG or Persona or something like that, when I finish it, I'm kind of empty. I'm kind of just wallowing and whatever, and musing, and all the philosophical meanings and whatnot, and the existentialism. It all comes crashing back over the next week or two. Now, Fire Emblem is the latest game. Fire Emblem Tree Houses. No, not Fire Emblem Heroes. For those of you out there who are corrected me on that mistake I made about 7,000 times. But yes, Fire Emblem Tree Houses. I finished it. I don't know where people were going with it. It's an 80-hour game. It's a 40-hour game, yeah. And I did a massive amount of side content. Maybe every second day, if not every second day, I had the chance, or at least maybe 3 or 4 out of the month. Tree, if there was 4 days to do it, I did it on Tree. If there was 4 days, or if there was 5 days to do it, I did it on 4. Extra battles. So I did everything. I did so much additional content in that game, and I still finished it at just over 40 hours. But it was a great 40 hours, and that's the positive to take away from it. However, I am kind of in a bit of an existential funk after it. I'm not ready to just start a new big proper game just yet. The next one I do plan on starting, hopefully over the next few days, will be Yakuza Kiwami. I know a lot of people are going to be happy about that because it's, oh, Q, you finally get around to Yakuza Kiwami. Yep, I'm finally going to get around. It's going to be beast. Now, however, I have something in my eye all through this segment. I don't know what it is, but anyway, unfortunately, I do want to put in a little update, a little clarification from last week's podcast, because I mentioned that there would be Overcooked 2 that night. However, several of those people, not all of them, but several of those people completely bailed and bitched out on me that night. Because, well, that's what they do. And like in my kitchen, they're just as unreliable in real life too. So, that's a bit of a problem for me in that regard. Now, I will say this, right? The next big game I plan on playing is about a month away. Let me rephrase that. The next big new game is about a month away. Off the top of my head, the next big new game that I plan on playing is going to be Gears 5. There'll be Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening at the end of September. I think there's another one in September as well. But the next big game I plan on playing is Gears 5. I will probably play Blair Witch at the end of the month. I think that looks good, or at least it looks semi-enjoyable. And I'm going to play that at the end of August, I believe it's out. But yeah, that's good stuff. So I do have some time in there before the next big release. I do hear Yakuza Kiwami is fairly short, especially considering Yakuza 0 was a bit on the longer side. But people tell me Yakuza Kiwami, because it's a remake of a short PS2 game essentially, that it can be done in 16 to 20 hours. Now, if that's what people say, I'll probably finish it in 10 because, well, people like to exaggerate these times. But on top of that, I was really feeling something today, and I think I might permanently work it into my rotation for a while. I have never liked to be one of those, I've never really been one of those people that will grind the same game consistently over and over and over and over for a million times. Shut up, Bieber, I know what you're going to type in there, but my point being to get better and better and better and better and better and better at a game to a consistently extremely high level. To get good at a game if you want. Now, I've kind of been feeling that I want to do that. But I want to do it, I don't want to say I want to do it a little bit differently because that sounds real pretentious. Granted, people tell me I'm a pretentious cunt. But still, I don't like to come across as a pretentious cunt, even if I am a pretentious cunt. So, I think what I've been wanting to do is, I don't want to get good at Dark Souls, I don't want to get good at Secret of Mana, I'm already beast at that. I don't want to get good at all that stuff. I kind of want to get good at a rhythm game. Specifically, I want to do it with Persona 5 dancing in that's Starlight, isn't it? You know what, I have it behind me. Yeah, Starlight. I want to get good at that. So I think I'm going to play that every day. Now, I was pretty good at when I first got it, and I haven't really played it since then. I platinumed it, I moved on to Persona 3 Dancing in Moonlight, platinumed that, played it for maybe 1 or 2 more days. I was decent at it. I was decent, but I could be better. And those games have such amazing music. The Persona games have some of the highest quality music there ever is. I've always said it, even in relation to how great the Final Fantasy music is. There's one thing it lacks in comparison to the Persona music, and that is character. And Persona 5 and Persona 3, and hell, even Persona 4, all the Persona games and their music just ooze character in every way. And I love them so very much. And I think I'm going to grind Persona 5 Dancing in Starlight. I'm going to get good at it. And I think I'm going to do that every day. Every day. Every day. We'll see how long it lasts. We'll see how good I get. I was decent at it. I haven't played it in such a long time. I have it here because I played one song earlier and I took a screenshot of it. But I also wanted to test my 4K capture a little bit. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. I'll probably stream a few of them. I don't know if that will be laughable or whatnot. But hey, it is what it is, and we'll see how it ends up. I do think I will improve significantly. Obviously, I have to shake off the cobwebs a little bit, but yeah, these things need to be done. Anyway, there's also one last one I want to mention in this segment, because of course everyone is always wondering, oh Q, what about Dark Souls? Well, that says it all. It will be coming back possibly eventually down the line. It's not officially dropped, but it's just so far down my list of priorities that I have so much more to do. Anyway, that's it for episode 20 of our Quack Experimental Podcast. As always, I want to thank everyone for joining me, shooting the shit, whatever it is, and sticking with me for all this ranting, rambling stuff, all these little extra tidbits of news, and of course, the most interesting part about it, what I'm doing. Anyway, as always, let me know in the comment section below any thoughts and feelings, opinions, whatever it is, if I hurt your feelings or whatever, and any of these topics, as well as if there's anything interesting you do want me to take a quick look at. Same way you can slide into my Twitter DMs. They are open for that reason, or at least one of the many reasons why they're open. But I can't promise I'll look at it, but I can't promise I'll talk about it, but I will naturally take a little bit of a glance at it and see if it's anything worth talking about. Of course, let me know. Wait, I don't need to say that, I just did that. Why do I suck at doing these outros so much? Anyway, hit the appropriate button to let me know how I did on the video. While you're at it, why not head on over, hit the subscribe button, and even ring the little notification bell. Naturally, YouTube being YouTube, they will do everything in their power to try block you from getting a live notification every time one of these podcast episodes is going to go the full comes up every weekend. And of course, you want to be the first one in on that, because why the hell would you not be? Anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and remember that winners don't play switchboards.